I am Daniel Stetson. I think most of you know me. I'm the executive director of the LSU Museum of Art, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. I wanted to give you a context, a little bit of what this discussion, navigating the art market, how it came about. Many of you, I hope, have seen already our Living with Art exhibition. It is up now until September 27th. Opened up in March, closed very quickly with our COVID lockdown. And it's open again. You can definitely go back and view it again. It is open safely. Quite honestly, I think it's one of the safer places to be if you're going indoors. You know, it's well laid out and organized for you. That exhibition has artworks from 9 local art collections, kind of celebrating that in an art museum setting, with the other 2/3 of our floor being the permanent collection of the LSU Museum of Art, which, if you think about it, a permanent collection is a collection of collections. It is either pieces people have donated from their collections, or it is works that we've acquired because people donated the resource to allow us to acquire them. So it really reflects our community. So one part is the private collections and holdings, samplings from 9 collectors, and the rest of it is artworks from our collection from all sorts of periods and times and styles, from decorative arts with Newcomb works to contemporary art back to historic paintings. It's a very broad-based collection. So one of the things I kind of want people to understand a little bit is that there is a relationship between artists, collectors, curators, directors of museums, most importantly, artists. And when you think about that as an ecosystem, that if you think about it that way, it's centered on the makers in a way. If you thought about it that way, the makers, the artists themselves. But then the galleries come into play, auction houses, artist cooperative, art festivals, art fairs, museums, and collectors. All of that together makes an industry, makes as I say, I describe it as an ecosystem because it is codependent. It functions quite wonderfully. Parts of it sometimes can be mysterious to folks. And I think going into a gallery can be, or participating in an auction, or even thinking about how to go about doing that. Either one of those might be intimidating or awkward for you. You know, if the artists are the essential workers, they rely on this system of support. And I hope those of you out there who are collectors continue to do it, and maybe today get charged up and go do some more and help out some artists during this lockdown. And those of you who aren't collectors, maybe you'll feel a little more comfortable and able to go do it. If the artists are our essential workers, you know, people you can buy from artists, you know, you can start by buying work from students. I mean, I know that some of my art collecting started really when I was in college, and I acquired works by my colleagues and friends. You know, you go past that, and eventually the amount you spend in dollars might raise. Well, today we're very, very fortunate to have 2 experts in their respective fields. We have Arthur Roger from Arthur Roger Gallery. He's the owner and director. He's been in this gallery work from 1978. He founded this gallery. Additionally, we have Neal Alford from Neal Auction Company. And Neal is the president and founder of Neal Auction, and he founded in 1981. So they've been around a substantial period of time, have a wonderful reputation in New Orleans. And I know for a fact, some of the artworks in the Living with Art exhibitions have been acquired or facilitated through both of these venues. And I wanted them to join us today to talk about this some. And the way we're going to do this is, first, I'm going to have each of them separately give brief introductions. And then I'm going to go back to Arthur, and we'll have a brief conversation. I'm going to ask him a few different questions. And then we'll have Neal do the same. And then we'll turn it over to questions from you. Now, there's a chat function that is there, and I hope you all will take advantage of the chat function. And as you go along and a question pops up in your mind, open it up and type in a question. At the end of the session, Courtney Taylor, our curator, is going to help facilitate the questions. She'll come on then and help us get back to those, but we'll hold the questions towards the end. I hope I've got everything set up for us, and looks like about 30 people on board now, so let's go ahead. And first, Arthur, would you just briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm not exactly sure how much you want me to go into it, Daniel, but my name is Arthur Roger. I've had the gallery since 1978. I had worked at a gallery in the French Quarter, which was actually a print gallery, and started as a framer, doing everything at the gallery, and just decided to open a gallery on Magazine Street. It was really a pretty tough time in New Orleans. There was really about a half a dozen galleries at most. Most of the galleries were sort of struggling galleries, and most of the artists were struggling artists at the time. I mean, with the exception of Simone Stern, which was really a pretty remarkable woman who sort of was going to see to it that New Orleans had a contemporary art gallery, even if she funded it herself. I had the good fortune of taking on Ida Kohlmeyer and Robert Gordy and John Scott and quite a few other established artists, George Durieux. And I really had very little ego in this. It was like really being at the right place at the right time and letting these artists sort of develop me into the person they wanted to be representing their work.
Thank you, Arthur. It's interesting to hear how early you started into this field. And Neal, we'll go to you. And I know you have a story about how Arthur actually inspired you in part to head your way. And, you know, in a very different way, you are involved with art and antiquities in a way that Arthur's more in contemporary art. But would you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Neal Auction?
Yeah, sure. Just a little bit. I learned the trade of business in London early on, the 70s, as a someone who helped move things around, furniture, decorative arts, and paintings. I was with a young woman who was at King's College at that time. So I came to the interest in the overall buying and selling and trade and paintings and fine art and furniture and antiquities just by being a labor, perhaps a good labor in that field. When I came to New Orleans later in the 70s, one of the things I saw early on at that was Arthur's first gallery on Magazine Street. I walked in and I knew something about the art market, but not much. And I walked in, there was a great video playing by Nam June Pak, a great, incredibly early avant-garde artist, and some other works. So that was just something I remembered and wanted to share with Arthur. Over a period of time, the handling of furniture, decorative arts, paintings, and that material, 30, 35 years now, within the auction framework, has not stifled my curiosity at all. I remain just the same, almost.
Interesting. So, you know, starting from England to, you know, doing that kind of background work, Arthur was, you know, did framing. You know, there's the kind of grassroots beginnings of the business, you know, moving around furniture and framing works of art for sale by others. I mean, that's kind of an interesting start to then both you end up in your home city, establishing what are now, you know, in the 40-year range, really institutions of note in your community. I find that a fascinating thing, and it shows your tenacity. You know, you've been through a lot of ups and downs as the economy and through hurricanes, and you know, and you both are still at it and then still vital to this industry. Again, part of this ecosystem. I think a very critical one. Let me go to Arthur a little bit, because Neal started talking about buying and selling. I mean, because that's the business, right? I mean, you guys have shops, have stores, have showrooms, you know, galleries and auction showrooms. And, you know, when you got started in the business and then you moved to this current location, how did you know, you start out with some artists you got an association with. How did you build that stable of artists that became the core of the work you do? And past that, do you exclusively manage them, or do you also show artists that you don't exclusively manage?
Well, that's a wide range of questions. I mean, first off, I'm just going to go back a little bit to the beginning of the history of the contemporary art scene in New Orleans. Like I said, okay, it really was something that Simone had started and was a pioneer, really the pioneer with these people. I think when I came on, it was just very ambitious. I was 20 years old. I really wanted very badly to make the gallery scene work. I think that artists responded to it, and I was very fortunate to have their trust. And so I took on a lot of the artists that originally that Simone had sort of cultivated and sort of began with. And you know, the thing is, it was a broken system. It was like artwork at the time had to be something that could go over the couch, could go over a chest, it could do all these different things. There was a sort of magical price of $500 at the time. This is 1978, where, you know, that was the most people would spend. But at the same time, galleries were closing rather than they were prospering, and also artists were really struggling. And so we sort of were, you know, very early to say, you know, let's forget about this. Let's do the most, like, you do the most ambitious works. We're going to take the gallery. We're going to try to make it look the kind of place, an institutional place. And also, you have to realize that there wasn't really a support system for contemporary art. New Orleans Museum, you know, I mean, I love John Bullard, but contemporary art was really something that wasn't really embraced by the museum. You know, the triennial, which is the only time that contemporary art walked in the door of the New Orleans Museum, was promoted as the show you love to hate, and it was all a joke, you know. And at the same time, we knew that we weren't a joke, and you know, so we did this. We sort of invested in getting the gallery to look more more prosperous and a more institutional space. And remarkably, everything seemed to look different. But at the same time, it was like this crazy burden of like, now what do I do? I mean, who's going to buy all this work? Well, at the same time, Portrait Street was starting. Pan Am was starting to collect a lot of art, build with collecting artwork. I mean, there was a lot of change that was going on as far as an acceptance of contemporary work. So it really was sort of like everything sort of falling in place, and really the beginning of what became a big art scene. And also the Contemporary Art Center had opened like the year before we had opened. So the Contemporary Art Center was really the beginning of a renaissance in contemporary art in New Orleans.
Interesting, interesting. You know, you know, you mentioned corporate buying, and then there's individual buying. And in your business, how does that divide?
You know, I mean, it all has an effect. I mean, the corporate buying was the beginning. I mean, actually, most collectors, most people that had the means, I mean, they had to have the sort of like, I purchased this in New York. I mean, you wouldn't want to say I bought it in New Orleans. It didn't have the same cachet. At the same time, I could go to New York and I could ask John Waters or Richard Prince or Peter Halley or all these different really significant artists, would you like to do a show in New Orleans? And they would go, yeah, I'd love to do a show in New Orleans. I mean, New Orleans had an immediate cachet that I was able to sort of use to sort of develop the gallery as well. Whereas if I would have been in St. Louis or another city, that would say, well, how well do you think you will do? What kind of institutional support? And all these other relevant questions that I never even had to answer to.
So let me go back to again, I mean, if you were to divide your business, is it a lot of the big corporate purchases and designers and stuff, or is it a majority of it by individual buyers?
Oh, well, in the beginning, it was really predominantly corporate. I mean, corporate was really the sort of beginning of it. And corporate was the validation that New Orleans needed for local collectors to actually sort of embrace contemporary art. You know, I think that, you know, the major collectors, there's a lot of passing down of artwork and also buying artwork in New York, where in New Orleans, like people walked into these new buildings and they would see these spectacular paintings and contemporary art. And they finally were able to get used to it and sort of embrace it, you know, and then say, you know, I want that for my, you know, I want that for myself. And it sort of developed a market in a very odd way. Now, on the other hand, I would say that corporate would be probably almost like a -5 in the gallery business.
Okay, that's right. So, you know, that's the thing that I'm always impressed with, Arthur, with you and other dealers I've known. It's the relationships you build. So you have relationships with artists that are very long-standing, and you have relationships with different collectors. How does that work for you? Like if somebody doesn't know you on this call and they wanted to come in and meet you and feel they could get your guidance and listen to you, maybe not even buy anything that day, but how would somebody just start that process?
Well, you know, listen, I mean, we're not, you know, when somebody comes in the gallery, we're not looking at them to buy something. I mean, we're really looking at them to enjoy what we're doing. I mean, that's really the bottom line and why we stage the shows. I mean, you know, we have to make sales, but the sales are really not on the surface of what we do. And you know, the main thing, you know, is just to be engaging and respectful. I mean, if you're respectful, there is no bad question. You know, there is nothing to be, you know, the only way you're going to learn is by asking questions. The only way I've learned is by asking questions. You know, so when somebody really is sort of responding to something, I feel like it's a good thing. You know, I mean, and I don't mean that it has to be like flowery or something that everybody's saying good things about what you're doing, you know. I mean, I remember when we first represented Elmore Morgan, who's from Lafayette, and I was like, at the time, really the majority of collectors were collecting Louisiana artwork, and I would go to these collectors and say, you know what? Louisiana Southern art didn't end in 1950. It is still going on, and it's still really doing well, and you really should be interested in what's going on. And when I saw Elmore Morgan, I thought, oh my God, it's landscape, it's colorful, it's really amazing, you know. And I would show it to him, and they'd go, oh God, I hate that. And I would go, wow, I really miscalculated this, you know. And then, you know, I would put it in the back, or it would be somewhere else, and then it would come back a few months later. I said, oh, what is that? I said, well, that's the painting I showed you 3 months ago, or whatever. I said, you said you hated it. And he said, no, you know, I sort of liked it. And I went, God, I really can't figure this out, you know. And I think, you know, like, there are certain artworks, you know, that you get an immediate response to. Like Ida Colmar, I feel like, you know, I had an immediate response to, but there are a lot of things that you really need to see a few times. You have to be reintroduced to it to actually develop some kind of connection to it. And sometimes, for the most part, those are the more significant connections that you have to artwork, or the ones that you have to come back to.
Yeah, I get that. One of the things when we talked just in preparation for this, are that you were talking about pricing and about how to do that and about the value of the work from your point of view. Could you talk a little bit about that? I found it a well said thing.
Well, you know, I mean, you know, we're very comfortable talking about money. I mean, that's really what it's all about, you know, with the gallery and the collector and what they're doing and the commitment they're making to us and the commitment we're making to them. So, I mean, there are several ways that, you know, this whole system works. I mean, first off, I will say that the most important thing a gallery does is to establish a price. It doesn't matter whether there's a gallery, an architect, a designer, or how many people are got their hand in the pie. You know, the price is the price, and that's really ultimately where you want to go, and that's where you want things to be. And that's why you want Neal to sort of take over these things, because then he makes those things public. But you know, the prices are based on what current market is doing. And we look at that. Now, you know, with Neal, it's the hammer price. So in other words, like, there's only one person, the last person, who's going to say the highest that they're going to bid on it. That's what the price that's going to be paid. Whereas the gallery, you know, I realize that I have to be responsible to the collectors. So in other words, when I'm selling something, I have to say, can I sell it twice for that? You know, that's generally the way I sort of approach the pricing and the way I sort of look at art. You know, we do it collectively in the gallery a lot of times. I mean, sometimes the artists like David Bates, who have the painting behind me, he has several galleries all over the country. And so those prices are determined by all the galleries. I have very little to do with those, with things like that. But I mean, my philosophy is always like, what can I sell something twice for?
And you said too, the other day, that the price is the price. I mean, that's why it's got a value, and whether it's sold to the gallery or by the artist directly or whatever, the value is the value, and it should be supported.
You know, no question. Let me tell you, if all the galleries were gone tomorrow, artwork wouldn't be 40 or 50% less if everybody was doing what they were doing correctly, and that's the way I feel about it.
Neal, let's turn to you then. You know, that prices are done by the hammer, you know, how it comes down and who's in the room or on the phone, or, you know, you've been doing this, you're at the auction house since 1983. You know, auctions have risen in prominence in the arts. They were always there, but they were seen as kind of wholesale, not retail. And now they kind of are risen up to almost a retail environment. Now you sell fine arts and antiques. It's a different realm. Occasionally you do have some very contemporary works that are sold. I don't think that's your main area, but it's one of them. For people in this space listening now, how does the consignment process work if you wanted to sell? And then as you finish that up, talk about, if you're a buyer, how does the purchasing process work for an auction, so that people would feel more comfortable? You see it on TV and you see them, you know, talking so fast and all that, but you know, that can be very intimidating. So if you would just take a minute and talk about that.
Yeah, sure. And I'll try to speak as slowly as I possibly can, particularly on the subject, I think, of how things arrive at auction, there's usually a need or some sort of other volition, I suppose. So these things that are coming to us for evaluation and potential sale, they obviously belong to other people, and they belong to collectors or perhaps a corporation. Almost always collectors or people who've had these things and have a need to sell, whether it's from an estate or there's been an arc of time where something was in one house for a long time, but the estate decides to sell material culture from that estate, or the heirs do. So it has a multiplicity of sorts. About someone just owns one painting and would like to sell it, comes from the estate, or perhaps a dig section from a museum. So the arrival here is for our credibility in being able to be articulate about how we sell the painting, to look at it for its potential value at auction, which we offer an estimate, which can be a bit elastic. We can negotiate an estimate. And then, of course, there is an agreement from the painting's owner, the consignor in our language, to trust us with it. And once that occurs, which is really the fundamental moment, then we advertise in market and try to contextualize it in an auction in the most appropriate and optimistic way, at least for potential bidders who are the other side of that coin. Buyers and sellers, I'm not sure how often they meet directly, but they meet all the time at auction, in certain to abstract that for you in a way. The seller and the broker, who is the auction process, meets the buyer.
So when you do it, you're up, so someone's come consigned with you, you guys have reviewed it and set a range of value for that work that you expect it to sell for. And then you go to sale. The seller agrees to those terms. Now you're there in the front of the auction, and you're calling off the prices, and people are raising their hands, and there's people often on telephones, right? I mean, that's another way to do it. How do people?
Online is phenomenally growing, not gradually, but incrementally and substantively. The phones have always been useful. I myself prefer the phone if I'm going to take the action to buy something myself somewhere else. Being in the room is ebbing away a bit, but it was always the most fun. It was always the most tactile, and that's part of meeting other collectors at the auction. But you do have to have time to do that. So presently, we're seeing the move, as you describe it, to online bidding, to phone bidding, and the rooms have narrowed a little bit in terms of the participation from the room bidders raising their hands.
So Neal, somebody listen to this, they would go to your website and go look at your catalog for the next auction. They can see it virtually. Then how do they know what they're really seeing? How do they get information? How do they experience the work before bidding?
The practice that we engage in is twofold, I guess. It's the catalog itself, which you refer to as being online. It's the obligation we have to present things as beautifully as we can with images and photographs. Additional images are available. The description of the property, the painting, so to speak, in this case, and our knowledge about it, however limited it may be or however expansive, we place that in front of the potential clients. I think the most key thing there you're referring to is how to buy something that you haven't gone in to an esteemed gallery such as Arthur's and enjoyed the dialogue with the gallerist, and also had a lot of time to look at the picture that you may be interested in buying. And the conversation about that is also between an art esteemed dealer such as Arthur and a client. With us, it's an aggregate of ways to do this, but looking at the picture, talking to our specialists, we have people who are really good at the objective criteria of what we're doing. We're not trying to, sell it except by what the client sees. And condition becomes the key factor, I think, in our business that your question leads to. How do you buy it without having full condition disclosure from us?
Now, Neal, there is obviously an opportunity, I don't know, a couple of weeks before to come see it in your showroom, because you always put those up. But that's a limited time. How do people engage in that if they wanted to come see that thing? Because I know you'll give a condition report also if they really do want to know, your statement about what you feel is the proper condition.
Yes. I think that's the thing that we're the most engaged with in terms of responsibility. And we take that both seriously and we enjoy it. The paintings from the late 18th century all the way up until the mid 20th century, are all subject to really close review. Whatever's happened over that span of time, 19th century and older pictures, to use the term, have been around for quite some time. So the picture itself and the painting and the canvas and the frame all have a material condition which we're good at. When I say we're good at it, it's a question of the discipline and the knowledge of how to describe it. The contemporary pictures that are showing up in the marketplace, the modernist pictures perhaps as well, they've had less time on the walls. They've had less time moving around. So their condition issues are still material, but a little bit less difficult in most cases. To explain.
In both cases for a buyer, either one of you can answer this, is what are like the guarantees for the person? They purchase it and they ended up, maybe they don't like it, or they feel it's not what they were told, or they didn't understand something. I mean, you probably face a lot of different questions from a buyer. What happens if they want to come back to you and talk to you about this piece that they just acquired?
Yeah, the conversation is ongoing. If you bought something from us at an auction 2 days ago or 2 years ago, to talk about the picture that you purchased here in any sort of realm is available. We're auctioneers. We love to talk. So there's a process there where it's good. I think the condition issue of the painting you buy or look at, or the object, whether it's a piece of furniture or something else at auction, that's a material issue that the old days, it was buyer beware at auction. And buyer beware is a negative. We don't use that term. We're not totally immune to the idea of it though. So when you go to auction to buy something, the integrity of the condition report on the object, the integrity of the venue, the auction house itself, the practice of the auction house, particularly with its staff, in terms of being articulate and very clear. That's better at some places than others, and that's certainly the realm.
Arthur, you want to answer the same sort of inquiry about that relationship, how it continues after the purchase?
Well, listen, I think, auctions are a very, it's an incredibly different dynamic of the kind of sales that we do. I mean, I sort of feel, that a good gallerist, it's not about the selling of the work, it's selling the work to the right person. I mean, the last thing I want to see is I want to see the painting come back on the market again. I want to see the painting, stay with that person and hopefully end up in an institution or something like that. We do get people that go to auctions and they purchase things and then they want to know if they can trade with us, which is, it's a bit offensive. And also, I bought something at Neal's auction last year. It was an Ida Kohlmeyer. It was just very badly presented, and I could see exactly that it was really a great piece. It was just a horrible presentation of the client who consigned it. So we purchased it. We had it restored by by a restorer, and then had it stretched, and then we had it placed with a phone call to New York collector. But I always say that if you have a relationship with the gallery, and you want to buy something at Neal's or at any auction, you should call us. I mean, we're not going to be horrified by that. That's just part of the world right now. And we care about these works. We want to make sure they go to the right collections. There was a great painting that was at Neal's, the same one that I bought the piece. And I told the person there, I said, look, whoever bought it, you should tell them to call me, because I could tell them what they need to do this, because it really needs a restoration. I mean, I get what Neal's saying, and also I want to say, paintings are living things, I mean, they have lives as well, things happen, and so there are bandages, there are things that happen to these paintings. It does not take away the value, in my mind, to the value of the work, but at the same time, if you've had something on the wall for 40 years, it needs a bath. I mean, it's sort of, there are things that are happening. You're cooking, whatever, people are smoking, whatever it is in the house, those things really do sort of take a toll on the actual surfaces of artworks. And so, I think most people are really sort of lazy, or they really don't want to go through the effort or the expense, really, to take care of these things. But truthfully, when you do it, it really makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the care of the work really matters. I mean, one of the things we were kind of bordering on the conversation that there is a type of competition between auction houses and galleries as a way, as forms for acquiring works. At the same time, I think it's symbiotic instead of parasitic. There is a relationship. And galleries and auction houses now, like people used to think go to an auction house and get a deal, but they've become more at a commercial pricing. They're not a deal in that sense. And it's a different relationship with each of you, how you have it. I liked Neal talking about the integrity of the whole auction house standing behind the sale. And I think the same thing is true for you, Arthur. Your reputation, all of those years of work stands behind whatever you do. Talk for a minute about that art market thing where, to me, it's the art fairs, they took over in a big way, setting some tones, and everybody reads the big prices, and it's still a sliver of the market, but it makes the headlines, just like in the auction houses. You sell that Van Gogh for so much, and it's the headlines, it's still a sliver of the market. But I know there is a type of competition, even in New Orleans, I'm sure. And that sliver of the market that the press covers falsifies it to some degree. It's certainly not a healthy view of it, I don't think. Talk a little bit about that. I don't care who takes that, multi-part kind of thing, but talk a little bit about the roles of the two and how they work together in an ecosystem.
Yeah, so one thing I would mention on that issue is that the coal mine that Arthur purchased after an auction, when Arthur and I were together in our front window here on Magazine Street, a terrific smaller coal mine, and it came to us exactly in the condition that Arthur describes. It came from the house or from the gallery. Yeah. So it didn't sell at the auction itself, didn't meet a reserve, and the bidding was not sufficient. Arthur, being beautifully alert, and had come to for another reason, the gallery saw it, and we looked at it together, and then we were able to negotiate or sell it to him as an after sale from the auction. But the exact reason it didn't sell at the auction, or the likely reason perhaps, was exactly the way Arthur described it, as condition. So I think that is a great observation, the differentiation of things at auction, in the auction building, and in the catalog process, the condition will be variable. And that's what we touched on prior as well.
Mm-hmm. Arthur?
Yeah, yes, no, listen, I was very appreciative of Neal, and I was really thrilled to get the piece. I mean, to be honest with you, I wanted to keep it myself. But, on your point about the art fairs, the art fairs are really, they're like a meat market. I mean, they're sort of the ugly underbelly of the art world, and I think even more, I find them, I understand the purpose and the reason why they're so popular. There is a sort of insecurity with a lot of collectors that somebody else is getting the better piece, somebody else got there before them, and all these sort of favoritisms and things like that. When you go to an art fair, you're going to see no dealer is going to put their second-rate pieces on their walls because they're paying a premium. They had to work really hard to get into those fairs. And so they're going to be really showcasing them at their best. And so the collectors feel very confident that they're seeing really what they want. If they have a certain artist that's on their checklist or whatever it is, that this is going to be probably the best example of that artist's work that they're going to get. And I think it's true at all levels of the art market when you go to the art fairs. So that's why collectors love it, But truthfully, it takes away all these sort of added things that really are important to the art market, the personal connections, the sort of like the ability to see that piece in the context of the whole body of work. I mean, all these things are sort of evaporated in the art fairs. But art fairs, like art galleries and everybody else, I mean, I think actually Neal probably is more easily adapted to the current situation than anybody else in the art world right now, without having those collective, personal, meeting spaces.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. Interesting to hear you talk about the competitive nature of collectors themselves, because there is something to that. And that's that, again, I think it's still that sliver. I often talk about art history as being like an iceberg. That part that sticks up out of the water is the stuff that gets in the press. Used to be everything in New York, right? Because that's where all the magazines were and everything else. Just below that waterline, there's work equally as good and maybe better that's huge, and it's from all over the country, and all art is local, and great art's made everywhere. And that's part of what you guys do, I think, is you discover things too and bring them out to share in different ways. You, Arthur, are straight from the artist most times, from the studio, and Neal, you're bringing them back to a visible world from private homes, or in a way. I mean, from the invisible to the visible. The competition aspect is interesting, because really it seems to me that the best collectors are ones that collect what they love, and what inspires them. It has little to do with anybody else but themselves, and whether it's through an auction or through a gallery. One of the things when we talked, I thought was interesting, because I think Neal said it, but I'll ask it to you, Arthur. And I know some of the answer to this, but do you know anything about art? How did you learn about art?
Oh, gee. I mean, I learned from my artists. I mean, as a kid, we grew up in the Ninth Ward. We never went to the museums or, God knows, an art gallery. And I just fell in love with artists. I mean, it really was I think it's just a commitment, a commitment to sort of listening to, I would say that this is the problem with going to auctions. I think that you have to be knowledgeable about what you're doing. You want to be informed about what else was done, what else is out there. You want to have conversations to exposure, and that's really what it's about. It's not about, going to college. It's really about just looking and looking and looking and looking and looking, and listening to other people and what they feel about it. It really is not a complicated science to be able to be a great collector.
Neal, what about you? What do you know about art? How do you know anything, and what'd you learn?
I know three things, and Arthur just said each of the three, and that's looking, looking, and looking. I think that's germane to handling the material culture that comes back in to be sold again and comes back into our business. The fact that we have really a scholarly staff with people that have graduate degrees and have studied art in the universities and colleges, that's very helpful. That makes us literate and erudite at times. But looking at the picture, or looking at anything, the intrinsic framework of the painting or other material is doable. And then the corresponding to that of what you know intellectually or by historical reference, and seeing the comparative studies of that, you can move along pretty quickly, but it does take energy and time, the way Arthur explained it, I think.
Take that to the museum, because it's a different area of art holdings. Arthur, you talked about how NOMA for the longest time didn't really have contemporary art. It took a while for them to recognize it, and I think that's almost always been the case. Museums have been more responsive. They wait longer for the sifting and sorting in some ways. They make mistakes. The thing that's happened with contemporary art museums and contemporary centers and stuff, I think more museums now are acting quicker, thinking differently. Many of them now have contemporary curators, not just modern curators, as periods, and or they have eclectic curators that are always looking. I think that looking, I'd say that to everybody out there too. The more exposure you have to individual objects and understanding how they're made and asking the questions about them, whether it's a photograph, a print, a painting, a sculpture, a piece of furniture, a decorative item, whatever it is, ask somebody that knows. Look at it, use the internet, go to the library. I still believe in libraries and hard copy books. But as you do that, an art museum reacts a little differently, and you end up with a different kind of expanse, and the way curators' roles are academic and have a certain level of understanding. But I think people are jumping in differently. You see museums like Baltimore deciding for a year all it's going to buy is art by women. They made a declaration because they saw a huge hole. Our own museum, we've adopted a collection plan to get underrepresented artists, which are people of color and women artists and others that are underrepresented in our collection. And frankly, the percentages to ever catch up will be hard after a collection that's been around since 1960. But what is visibly shown in our galleries has caught up more now than it ever had been, with the diversity of what the voices are. Part of that is because we see things through both the agencies like you and through artist studio visits. Arthur, you talked about meeting artists and how much their voice meant to you, and Neal, it's being surrounded by young scholars and actually seeing the products. I want to remind everybody out there to please go ahead. Why don't you, think for a second, maybe put in a question. We'll go to one in just a moment. And I was just going to say, Arthur, is there any kind of last thing you want to say before we go to questions?
I do. I do think that one of the main points that I'd really like to hammer on my development and that is important is the artist, and how fortunate I was to listen to artists and Ida Kohlmeyer really taught me the business and also the essentials of being a good dealer, and her, one of the most lasting impressions she made on me was that you always follow the artist, you never follow the collector or the market, and I think that these sort of goals of institutions right now is incredibly honorable, and I support it. And we're doing things also to sort of re-examine our role in the whole art market and how well we've done and how much more we can do and how we can correct things, that institutional problems that exist. But at the same time, we want it to be meaningful. We want it to be right. We don't want to be swept away in a trend, and we want to be anchored in what art is really supposed to be about.
Neal, do you have a couple words you want to add?
I think I agree with the premise that for sure your subjectivity and your study and the opportunity you have to look at art within our material culture takes time. It's not instant gratification. So I do think the subjectivity of how one looks at it and begins to study it and make comparative studies and deal with the gallerist and the artist and the venues, I think that informational education is really helpful. Doesn't take forever. And as long as you do it along the way, I think you enjoy it more as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's what I said at the beginning. I think of artists as essential workers. I think that phrase is best understood now in a way that it maybe hadn't been. And how the arts have I think, nurtured us some during this period. I don't know about you. It's helped me to have art around my house, my home. It's helped me to be at the museum sometimes. It's, hear the music or watch a play. The big to-do that Hamilton was on Disney Plus. I mean, it all of a sudden, the arts matter. And there's musicians doing private concerts from home in ways that I found very special during this time. But visual arts have really helped sustain me. And that relationship to artists, I've made a point of buying a few things during this period, just because I go back to that artists are the most vulnerable part of the ecosystem. Go to Arthur, go to Neal, go to the artist, do something, acquire something and build your own collection and find how a work grows over time with you. That's the amazing part, how much they change. Now let's switch, I guess. We'll go to some questions. Courtney, I actually can see the couple of them. I think I'll go ahead, okay? The first one here is, what options might be open to you if you inherit a sizable collection from an artist that you can't fit in your own home, but may not want you to sell off piecemeal? I don't get the last part. If you inherit a sizable art collection, and it's from an artist, they can't fit it. How should somebody handle that? Where should they go? Who should they talk to? Either one of you.
I may not have understood the question. Was it a house full of one artist's work or artist in general, plural?
It says artist singular. They inherited a sizable collection from an artist. Now, I don't know if that means it's just their work or not, Neal, quite honestly. One artist. This person just said one artist.
I think that's a significant something to think about. If you have the works of an artist, I think the gallerist where the artist was represented and came from, if it's a 20th century work, would be ideal to go back and seek the references there and the advice. That's more likely for someone having a whole range of just one artist's work in a house. It would tend to be contemporary at that level. So I would defer to Arthur. That might be I think the gallerist.
I agree totally. That's exactly what I would recommend someone to do with a group of work.
Go get it evaluated to some degree?
Like Neal said, I think that if there's somebody who has an association with the work, that's the person that you really should be pursuing. I have another question here that I really kind of like that I think would be interesting from both of you. And I'll start with you, Arthur, but
What makes a good collection of art?
Oh, well, I definitely have a strong opinion on that. I mean, you know, I still buy a lot of artwork. I never know. I mean, I sort of like, I mean, I don't want to say I never know. I mean, I sort of like take risks, you know, and my partner and I watch television in our den, and normally I bring it in there and I put it by the television so I can look at it a long time, you know, like keep on looking at it while we're binging on different series on Netflix or whatever. And you know, it's sort of a way of like, I think by living with things, you know, I can sort of determine whether or not I made the right choice or not, you know, whether it's something that really works well. But I think that what you really want to do, where you want to elevate, is that if you are a great collector, and you know, and there are so many great collections, that by putting this piece of artwork next to that piece of artwork, you see something that you never would have seen if you didn't have those two pieces of artwork together. That's ultimately what a great collector does, you know, and that's what you really want to do, you know. I mean, and it is sort of like shows why it's problematic, like when you have an art curator, for example, you know, that's building an art collection. You know, there can be sort of a little bit more of a sort of a checklist, like you got that person and that person, and everybody that you know that is of that level has the same people. You know, that's really, to me, nothing interesting. I mean, what I really like to see is that there's something about that person, in other words, something about that collector that knew to put those two things together, that if I didn't see those things together, that I never would have had that same opportunity.
Yeah, that made me think a whole lot of, well, first off, it does not take a lot of money to start an art collection or build one. People have that misconception. And I think of Dorothy and Herbert Vogel in New York in their rent control department. They were referred to as the mini moguls because they were diminutive folks. He was a postal worker and she was a librarian. And they bought the first Solowit ever bought in New York City. They built relationships. They ended up with thousands of artworks. They gave 50 pieces to every state in the nation, a museum in every state in the nation. Nome, I believe, got them in Louisiana. Plus, they gave equally another, you know, 2,000 or 3,000, maybe it's 5, I can't remember, to the National Museum of American Art. And they donated all that. And that was purchased on those resources over all those years while living in a small rent control apartment in New York City. I remember going there and visiting, and over their bathroom toilet was a wall drawing by Saul LeWitt, and the doors to their closet were done by Richard Berry, installation work. They had it everywhere. Neal, or Arthur, you raised your hand.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, if I wasn't mistaken, that their ability to collect this amazing collection was because they were collecting works on paper, whereas most collectors really wanted paintings, which there still is this really prejudice that paintings are more valuable than works on paper, and so in other words, like, paintings are going to be a lot more valuable than works on paper. So at the time, nobody was interested in the works on paper, whereas truthfully, a lot of times artists really work out their ideas, and some of the most sort of hands-on work are going to be the works on paper. It used to be that artists like Robert Gordy, for example, would never go to a canvas until he had all of his ideas worked out on paper. You know, now everybody is so different. They just go right to canvas. They don't even consider about canvas is expensive or anything like that. But, you know, in 20 years ago, you wouldn't go to a canvas and be reckless about your ideas.
You're right. I mean, the Vogels focused primarily on conceptual and minimal, I think, primarily. But they ended up with some sculptural pieces and stuff. Michael Lucero, they had a big Solowit hung off the wall. But they also own several of his wall drawings, which are, you know, directions on paper that can be produced. Very interesting sort of thing. All right, somebody else asked, social media such as Instagram, is it a good way to get a gallery to notice their work? And if so, what's the next step? So this is an artist doing stuff on Instagram and stuff. How do they get noticed by an artist, by a gallery, or by, well, I guess gallery in this case? How does an artist?
I think it's a brilliant idea, and I think that personal sort of like invitations to say, hey, look at my work, or I just want you to be aware of what I'm doing. I think all those things are very valuable. I think any artist, you know, artists don't necessarily need a gallery. I mean, artists can go about careers in many ways, but, you know, I think a gallery is really probably one of the most essential ways for an artist to establish themselves. But I'm thrilled when I have an artist that's working with me on doing the job that needs to be done.
Well,
So I
like,
think it's a great idea.
how many new artists do you take on, Arthur? Because I can't imagine you can take on very many.
Know, I mean, listen, that's the problem. I mean, it's like any gallery who has more than, say, 20 to 25 artists is probably not doing a great job for their artists, because it really requires a lot of effort, particularly when you get to a place where we are, because we're dealing with a lot of archives, we're dealing with a lot of clients that have purchased works from a long period ago, and there are always loans and different aspects that we need to be working with. That I would say that actually, you know, the majority of our work has nothing to do with sales. It really is to do with these types of things. So if we take an artist on in a year, that's pretty good. You know, I mean, we want to keep the gallery current. We don't want the gallery to sort of go in a time capsule, and we want to keep young artists on, but at the same time, it becomes harder and harder for us. Where, say, for example, like the Front and Good Children and all these really incredible places, artist collectives that are on St. Claude, you know, they could bring on 13 artists in a year. You know, I mean, that's a very exciting thing. We did that when we started, but that was 40 something years ago. You know, we can't do that now.
Arthur, do you go to Good Children and places like that to go?
Oh, I buy things from them all the time. Yes, I love it.
Okay. Yeah, because I like hearing that. For those of you out there who don't know them, they're wonderful artist collaboratives and cooperatives, and they do some wonderful exhibitions. I mean, there are folks that we know in Baton Rouge that show there, and it's really kind of exciting to see. This is one that I guess I apologize. I think it is also a little bit about, that could be either of you. Do you have any insights about buying art to enhance a space or creating a space to highlight the art? Any insights about either? Neal, Arthur?
Take that.
Yeah, Neal?
Yeah, what was the question again? Sorry.
It's about, do you have insights about buying art to enhance a space or insights about creating a space to highlight the art?
That's so subjective in my own understanding of things as an auctioneer. I think all of us suffer every day for the lack of art, which is quite a mid-20th century, I think, belief. And the contemporary poets at that time, Creeley, Olson, Elizabeth Bishop, they all knew that if you read their poetry. So we know we suffer for the lack of art, but how to find the space for it, I'm unclear on it sometimes. In your house, your gallery, it would take a lot of space probably to satisfy you know, the deepest ambition. So you pick a picture that you like and you look at an artist that you want to you know, walk by and stand by and be with. If you're talking about your house or you know.
That, like there are collections that are focused in a key area or on an artist or on a style. Then there's eclectic collections. Arthur, what's your experience kind of in both sides of that in a way? I mean, if you're wanting to form a collection into your space, I mean, I believe in the phrase that it does not have to match your couch. I think, you know, I used to say that if you put up enough artwork and you feel like you don't have any walls left to put anything up, when you buy the next piece, you become a collector. Before that, you're a decorator.
Yeah.
You know, but how do people do that to decide what path to take? Because I think you're right, subjective is the word, but what is your experience with that?
Yeah, Daniel, there's unlimited path to that. You know, I mean, we can have, we will work with decorators, we'll work with art consultants, we'll work with clients directly, where we commonly have people that'll send us an image of their wall, you know, with the house, and they want something for that, and we'll sort of give them some recommendations, you know, and you know, again, you know, it's really developing a sort of a skill to sort of be appropriate, you know, to find something that they're going to love, even if it's something that, you know, you might say, look, this is a little bit of a leap, maybe a little bit of leap for you, but if you trust us, I think you're really going to fall in love with this, you know. I mean, it was like I was talking about the Elmo Morgan, like, you know, some things, you know, they're going to, like, you know, we may be here, but we might be able to get them here, you know, and so we want to try to commonly bring people along.
And one last question I think we'll go with is, what aspects of an artist that make his or her pieces have great value over a long period of time? How does something sustain value in that sense that an artist might make?
I'm going to say something, and I know Neal can probably answer it because Neal's the definitive voice probably on all this. But, you know, I always say that anyone who tells you they can explain the art market to you, don't trust them. But Neal, you could take it from there.
Yeah, I really appreciate the responsibility that you offer. I think that the art market and the subjective issues of what people want to own is their own. I can't speak to it easily. I think that Arthur's intimacy with lots of his clients and sharing that is very helpful. People spontaneously will buy what they want to buy for either over the sofa or wherever they decide they want to have a gallery and paintings. It's a movable feast in some ways, and I wouldn't want to predict anything.
Well, I think you're both right about that, and that people can buy, collect, and collect up or down. I mean, they can change directions. I've known people to really disband a collection because their taste changed as they grew in what they were acquiring, that sort of thing. Or you start small and then you want something big. Arthur?
Yeah, you know, I just want to say one other thing that I see is that I've known to be a problem, you know, was like when we were developing a lot of new collectors and they would buy something and it was, and they got so, it was sort of a leap for them. Like they would buy an Ida Kohlmeyer and they loved it, you know, they really was so excited about it. They got a lot of validation from it. And then they wanted to buy another Kohlmeyer and then another Kohlmeyer. And I went, well, no. You really don't want to keep doing that. You want to sort of expand, you know, you don't actually, you know, you're going to diminish the impact of what you've done by sort of like continuing on the same path, you know. The same path is really the wrong way to go. You have to sort of to venture out. You have to do other, you have to take risk, you know. And so I just wanted to, it was just sort of an observation on collecting.
Appreciate that. And Neal and Arthur, I really do appreciate this full conversation. We could go for a lot longer. We had set this for an hour and we're just hitting that now. You know, the relationship with artists becomes critical. I think, Neal, your relationship is different than Arthur's. You know, most of your stuff is not coming from the artists themselves. Arthur, yours very often is coming straight from the artist. I just want to go back to thinking about them as the essential workers, people that keep this ecosystem going. But I also just want to encourage everybody out there to, you know, go look at what you've collected and reassess it, possibly think about it. Not be afraid to go ask somebody's opinion or talk through what your thoughts are, whether that be a curator, a gallery director, an auction house, whether that's a scholar and an art historian, or whether it's the artists themselves. You know, on the screen right now, I hope you're seeing, there's 3 shots from our selections from the Baton Rouge Collections, Living with Art. Quite a variety. There's a nice Lynn Emery and a Kohlmeyer, and some 19th century, early 20th century pieces, a Tiffany. You know, there's a variety of works in our show, and I hope you get a chance to come see it. Our next program actually is this Thursday night. And if you haven't, I think maybe when you signed up for this, it might have helped you sign up. Oh, Courtney's going through these. I'm sorry to not keep up, Courtney. Conspicuous Satirical Works by Carolyn Durieux. They just run through this month. They close at another end of August, can't remember, 20 something. I can't remember the exact date, 30th. Excuse me, it is 30th. A wonderful project Courtney put together from our collection. There's even a few caricatures that some local artists have done that we've installed. The museum is set up so that there is social distancing throughout it and a pathing that can take you through it. We do require masks, but it's a great way to chill out in the Louisiana heat. Our air conditioning's always on, and there's some beautiful, beautiful things to see. And again, that's open till the 30th, and the Living with Art's open until September 27th. Here is our LSUMOA.org, our website at LSU MOA. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. Both are great resources for keeping up with our activities. Our website has a blog. There's a lot going on there. Anyways, this Thursday, the 6th at 5:30, there is Bryce Bischoff. He's an LSU graduate, an LA-based artist who works in film and video. and photography, and it really almost performance. A very interesting artist. I really admire his work. We have two in our collection. One of them is up currently in our contemporary galleries. And then I also want you to know that for our members on this call, that you'll soon be seeing notice this coming week for our annual meeting of members on August 13th at 5:15. It'll start at 5:15, and we're going to have a cellist who gives a brief performance, an LSU grad who's now over at Emory University. We're going to have our annual report, kind of a review of the year, and we're going to end also with a poetry reading. We wanted to add elements of art because we have to do it through Zoom instead of typically in the museum where we get to go upstairs and celebrate an exhibition. It actually would have been the Carolyn Durieux show if it had happened in a timely manner, but of course, so many things change. If you look right now in the chat box, you'll see a link that you could copy. Just right-click on it and copy it. It's a link to our programs, the upcoming events, find out art-making resources on our website. We've been very active during this down period. I want to thank, and I hope you all will join me in thanking Arthur Roger and Neal Alford. Their time with us in preparation of this and the conversation they had today is greatly appreciated. And with that, unless there's any final words you guys want to say.
No, I appreciate being here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Neal. Thank you, Courtney.
Very much appreciate the opportunity. Take care, Roger. Arthur, I look forward to seeing you soon.
Courtney, you have anything I didn't touch there? I hope I hit them. Did I get everything, Courtney?
Got it all.
Did I get them okay?
Yeah, you got everything. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday and buy art. Support the artist.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.